After I
so on
see
and
you
so forth.
shaking your head on almost every point Sunity is making there.
Yes, Sunity, we're in agreement. I wanted to add a few points to what Sunity was saying and to take up her line of reasoning to talk about what I'd like to see. I was pretty surprised. I mean, I'll just make 3 or 4 quick points about what could come in the Prime Minister's address. I understand it's in 2 days' time. I think they said the 29th that he was going to address.
Tentatively.
Tentatively, yeah. Well, the first thing is that I was quite surprised when listening to the budget on the 5th of October that a devaluation didn't form part of the budget. I expected a devaluation somewhere in there. Let us say that's my number one point, okay? Which relates to some things that were said here. Second point is that in fact about $21 billion of the monies identified in the budget as revenues were what accounting people would call exceptional items. In other words, they were items that were one-offs and would not occur in succeeding years. For example, one big item of concern was the block of Republic Bank shares owned by Clico that was to be disposed of to repay the state for the money spent on the bailout. It was about $9 to $9.5 billion. Now, given the way this entire game has played out around the bailout, and given the way that Mr. Dupree has proven litigious and he has not the slightest hesitation about getting the top legal representation to defend his interests, and given the fact that the Republic Bank is the jewel in the crown of the Caribbean corporate empire, will Mr. Dupree roll over and allow the state to just sell the shares to Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Rennie B could buy some, and I could buy some, and Rhoda could buy some, and Dr. I don't think so. I think Mr. Dupree will be taking every possible legal step he can. He's well advised to stop and block it up. So in fact, the actual revenues underpinning the 2016 picture have a kind of a there's a kind of a questionable, and I don't mean questionable to say that Mr. Imbert has done anything that's improper. I don't want to take that meaning of it, but questionable in that in fact how sound are those revenues in us going forward? How solidly can we depend on them? And the other point I want to make, the other 2 points in terms of us going forward and positive suggestions. We have a public procurement law, and we have made some progress on that. We put a lot of work in, myself and my erstwhile colleagues, we put a lot of work in to getting it to this point where the law, in fact, was passed in Parliament a year ago in December 2014. It was partially proclaimed at the end of July 2015 by President Kamona. We are on the road to implementation. There's been an amendment bill tabled in the Parliament on the 13th of November by the PNM, a 10-page bill. There's some good things in there, some things that are not that good, and so on. But we need to, that Joint Select Committee is to report back to Parliament on the 22nd of January. We need to move swiftly to implement the full public procurement law so we have proper modern control, effective control over all transactions in public money. If money is a problem, and it certainly seems that it is, if the supply of public money is in question, the amount of money we need to run our national affairs, we need to put modern, effective controls in place. Now is the time. We can't afford any more delaying. The last point I would make, coming to the whole question I raised earlier on about NGC and the Beetham Water Project and the off-the-balance sheet projects, is that we have to take an opportunity. Dr. Rowley mentioned it several times on the campaign trail. I was very pleased to hear him say it when he was speaking about a new infrastructure, a new institution in terms of a public accounting office to do national accounting and public financial management, and that needs to link back into a whole model of how we account for our public funds. At the moment, our public funds are accounted for on a cash basis, which is what we would say colloquially is a copybook page, like a parlor. We need to account for our public funds on an accrual basis, which is a more modern basis and more realistic. It allows us to show loans and notes of guarantee and all of these things and get a proper picture of what's owed and what opportunities are there. So those are the things I'd like to see. I mean, for whatever it's worth, maybe somebody important is listening, maybe not. Those are the things I'd like to see. To put that out there, you know.
All right, we're going to come back. We must touch on the governor of the central bank, but before I do that, Rhoda, some of the things you would like to hear or what you expect the Prime Minister will be saying.
Planning to make money, or where they're planning to make investments, because we've talked a lot about how we're going to save money and which quarters we're going to be cutting spending from. But I want to hear what is trade and investment. What are the Ministry of Trade and Investment's thoughts on where we're going to be expanding, which areas we're going to be seeing as new areas for expansion, what planning and development has in mind as well. So I'm hoping that when the Prime Minister gives his speech, he's also going to be talking about how we're expanding things or how we're going to be pushing forward, not just how we're going to be saving and how much austerity is needed in the next year or so.
Part of the diversification, I think, is thrown out of the window. The panel may agree with me that the once touted aim of making Trinidad and Tobago the financial capital of the Caribbean with confidence, banking confidence, may be gone out of the window at this point. Let us go across. I've got exactly 2 minutes for everybody coming around on your take. Let me start across with Dr. James on the whole situation with the governor of the central bank. Well, there are two parts to this. One is the disclosures. From all I have read, it said that there may be some breaches of the law. Of course, different attorneys will go about that. But more importantly, the perception. The Trinidad Guardian today had in its editorial the question of perception of how the dismissal of the governor it was going about. The fact that it went before the acting president, the fact that it was a public thing, the fact that we could have waited for a while. I am not too sure. How do you read this situation in the sense of what is at issue, which is the disclosure, and then some say haste to remove the governor?
So you are focused on the dismissal.
I am asking two parts here. One, but because you're not the attorney, unless there's another aspect I didn't know about, because many say he breached laws, central bank laws, as far as confidentiality is concerned. The head of Massey is of that opinion, and a number of other people. How they went about it, the public specter of this thing.
Oh, okay. I think the government finessed Joala Rambaran.
Mm-hmm.
I think they finessed him and then dismissed him. I don't think he was expecting this. The government wanted to get rid of him and waited for the right mix of conditions so to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those conditions was to wait until Mr. Carmona was out of the country. Because when the president is out of the country, the person who acts is the president of the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who is the president of the Senate? A government person.
Former government minister, yes.
Clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christine Kangaloo automatically assumes the reins of power in the president's office. We must not forget, these people are appointed by a political party.
Mm-hmm.
So they serve the interests of that party. We want them to be independent, but they can't be, because of the way that they were put into office.
Mm-hmm.
So Columbian Bird says that that's a matter of coincidence, but only the faithful will believe him. Yeah? This was strategic, in my judgment. And so the government said, okay, we will put Christine there. This is Miss Kangaloo. Miss Kangaloo will sign off, because it's only the president can remove him. We all know that. Knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which now brings us to whether, of course, the government acted with obscene haste and so on. I don't know what is obscene haste. This is a political issue. Here is a governor of the central bank who was forced to return to the previous system of distribution, right? Mm-hmm. Who clearly was peeved that he was asked to do so, but who didn't have the honor, the decency, the fortitude to resign on a matter of principle. That if you have to do something which you are fundamentally opposed to, you should resign.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He didn't choose, he decided to remain. Then he did something else. He announced that we were in a recession, raising the issue of what the definition of a recession. Some people say it's 2 successive quarters where your GDP is in decline.
Mm-hmm.
This guy waited until the 4th successive quarter to speak when the UNC was out of power. Right? Now that enraged a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Why would you do that? Of course, why would you, holding such an important office, go out on a limb and say so? Obviously, your words will have some kind of impact, which of course they did. So he did something strange. Now, I am thinking that he erred in so doing from a constitutional point of view, because he was making a statement that affected policy. If you make a statement like that, you have to say, well, how do we fix it? Mm-hmm. Now, in order for that to be fixed, there has to be some collaboration with the government. So he's hiding behind a particular notion of independence. What is this business about central bank governor being independent? Why is that important all of a sudden? All of a sudden. You need to collaborate from a managerial point of view. Right? So that enraged the government. Why would you do that? And so they decided to get rid of him. I'm just giving you the reasons now that might have moved the PNM to act in the way they did. And the quicker he should be removed, the better from the PNM's point of view. Now, I had a problem with the governor personally. I thought that if you're going to reveal the names of the major users of foreign exchange, you had better tell me that they were using foreign exchange inefficiently. And you had better go on to show how that could have been fixed.
Correct. Yes.
Nothing like that. He just boldly revealed it. Not only that, data for bodies like the CSO come from these very same companies who volunteer the information or who do it out of goodwill. There's nothing to force you to cooperate with the government where the figures are concerned. Now, if you say something like that threatens to injure the reputation of these people, and you want data from them.
So much for your cooperation, yes.
How are you going to get the data? Easily. And I'm saying, here's another error that this man has made.
So I've got to move through the panel, but in fact, you're saying what the Prime Minister said he fired himself.
Well,
from his utterances, Sunity.
I think the whole thing was a disaster from beginning to end. And why are we assuming that if the request went from the Prime Minister to Kamuna, he would not have just done what Christine Kangaloo did? The assumption we are making is that he was a UNC appointee.
Yes.
All of these people are political appointees, from the governor to the president to the acting president. These are all political appointees. And that's where I think Jwala made quite a number of mistakes. I think the Prime Minister also made mistakes. He's talking now about not wanting to put the central bank into controversy in the way he speaks. But he was on the campaign trail as an opposition leader, making political mileage out of Jwala. But of course, you can't blame him there either, because the man is a political appointee, and we need to face that fact and not pretend that this is some insulated entity. If we want that, we have to change the system to the thing. So I just think it's it is tragic that the central bank, which has prided itself for so many years, and the staff there work with a certain ethic and so on, that they have been drawn into this maelstrom. And a wiser head might have resigned and not taken the bank all this way. There is something about public confidence in institutions, but we have to fix this so that there is not the opportunity for this to happen again.
Afra?
Yeah, well, I'm not an attorney. I can't comment on the on the merits of the case. Obviously, it's going to be a case. Rambaran is going to go to court and so on. What I could say is that what we're dealing with here is a very interesting case. We're dealing with a case where we're dealing with information, and whether, in fact, information is something that's readily, regularly, and openly available, or it's something that the political powers that be have the discretion to decide who knows what and when. Information has a value, and that power to dispense information as they see fit is something that we have to challenge. And that is what is at stake with the Yawala Rambaran story. I want to say that if we look at the Rambaran story, we see a high official who is dismissed for breaching what appears to be the confidentiality clauses in the banking laws. I'm not a lawyer, the court will decide on that, okay? And the procedural thing about dismissing the gentleman and so on. What is interesting to me is for those of us who are seekers after truth, seekers after meaning, some of us sitting in this room, we need to really look into the reasons, because we don't know everything the cabinet knew. What was the reasoning for dismissing Yawala Rambaran? And conversely, to return to something we said earlier on, how did Ewart Williams manage to complete 2 complete 5-year terms?